Good morning to everyone joining this LinkedIn Live from all around the world. I am Akshay Bajaj and I serve as the co-founder of Global Learning Space Network. I thank CIVOM for inviting me to moderate this panel discussion that's dedicated to the theme of sowing the seeds of foundation. That is, can we teach 21st century skills in a 19th century classroom? So this is going to be a 60-minute panel discussion with us having the icons of the architecture, design, and learning environments, starting from Hashmila Bhoola, who is the founder of Ed.U.Morphosis, Align Your Essence and Conscious Parenting Initiative. She is into educational kinesiology and brain gym facilitator and trainer. Thank you so much for coming here, ma'am.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And then we have architect Manisha Agarwal, who serves as a co-founder of Mobile Offices and Architects. So when we are talking about youth skills, I just found that architect Manisha went to the Cathedral and John Connon School for her schooling, then went to the famous SEPT University to pursue her diploma in architecture, and also was an exchange student as a Bezalel Academy of Art and Design in Jerusalem, and then to Cornell University to pursue her master's in architecture. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am.
Having me here.
And we also have Mr. Yogendra Patidar, or aka Yogi, who is the director of CIVOM. They have designed learning spaces all across India, and their work across schools, colleges, universities, and campuses is quite well known for their approach towards neuroarchitecture and how they are developing learning spaces that align with well being and joy of learners. Thank you for joining us, Yogi.
Thank you.
So we have a 60-minute conversational flow with us, starting from the sowing the seeds of movement, and we have themes coming up. But actually, I want to open this conversation with a very raw question. Why do you think I have a moment for you all? Why are we even discussing about the youth skills in today's time? Because you all come from quite diverse domains, and I want to know what are the 21st century skills and why is it needed to have a discussion today. So I have a moment for you all, starting from Arctic Manisha.
I think there is a lot of change that one is seeing around us, and whether it's related to technology and whether it's related to methods of teaching. So I think it's a very relevant question today to examine existed to, you know, even before we were born, to what exists today, and have there been any transformations in whether it is learning spaces, whether it is in the kinds of methods, in the methods of learning. So I think it's a good point to re-examine that and then go on to the sort of task of designing spaces.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Quite an impressive answer to re-examine the perspective that we have already known. So now moving on to Hashmila, what's your take on this?
So skills is something that is acquired over a period of time, and so when we're looking at the space of pedagogy, it's the origin. That's where when we're saying sowing the seeds, that's where the seeds are sown of one's skills, whether it's cognitive skills, physical skills, mental skills. So it's the groundwork where nurturing happens. So that's where skills originate. So when we're looking at the topic of we're celebrating youth skills. That's the origin of it. So for me, that is key that we discuss how it occurs, where it occurs, why, and the difference it makes later is profound. So if the foundation is quite solid, we're going to get the outcomes revealing the fruits of the hard labor, that is a collective of the ecosystem which makes up the school background, which is the teachers, the parents, the child, and the environment in which they found. And that engagement is interesting to then, I'm sure Manisha will enlighten us, because the furniture, the environment is key in terms of how the child learns as well, not just not just from a physical perspective, but also from a um, what can I say, literal and figuratively speaking, the environment is an architect in the way the skills develop.
Hmm, quite enlightening. And Yogi, what would be your take on it?
So I think skills are it's a very relevant to learning. When I if you need to define learning, learning is acquiring new skills and new knowledges. Okay, and if you talk about today's context, okay, in 21st century, how this learning with knowledge and skills should shift is, I think there are three key considerations which we take in our research also. One is technology advancement, like Manisha said. Second being user behaviors, because if you look at, that's why our generations have been divided between Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, and all of that. Okay, so because there's a different behavioral set when you're coming with the technology or when you're born with the technology differently. Okay, user behavior being second context, and third is, I believe, knowledge of learning. So today we have a lot of science on knowledge of learning. So I must know, Hashmila and the teams might be doing a lot of work on that side of it. But how human really learns, you know, what is the data on that? What is the science around it? Because before fMRI we could not translate that. Okay, but because of fMRI available, you have a lot of data and scientific knowledge about metacognition or any other part of learning. So when you look at science of learning, and the knowledge of that can be applied in real education today, which is going to shift the way we teach and make them learn. So I think these are three key considerations which is relevant in today's time. There is a funny quote which says, we are teaching our kids in 19th century classroom with 20th century teachers in 21st century. Okay, so how do we really change that game? So this is some way high notes where we need to think to shift the way we were doing it, and is it relevant or not? So that's where that's the thinking.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your take on that. Now let's start with the first theme of this, sowing the seeds of movement. The question coming up is, why do we expect young adults to suddenly display proactive leadership, innovation, and adaptability when their entire childhood was spent in forward facing, heavily structured environments built for static compliance? And the first question comes to Hashmila. Please discuss the physiological and neurological connection to skill building, how movement, balance, and spatial freedom are not extracurricular but are primary neurological prerequisites for brain integration, stress regulation, and critical thinking. All yours.
Okay. So, proactive leadership, innovation, and adaptability is what we're looking at. And as I said, the seed for all that is the skills development, and skills development happens when you're a child. So your movement, balance, and spatial freedom, if we look at it literally and figuratively, like I started initially and I alluded to it, was the fact that when the child, whatever in educational kinesiology, it's come about by somebody called Dr. Paul Dennison. And he himself was regarded as having special needs. So I just want to give the background and give you all a little bit about where my thinking is coming from. Otherwise, it's going to sound a bit vague and out of context. So let me give you some context. And that's what Brain Gym is about, is content within context and vice versa. So how do we integrate information? So Dr. Paul Dennison himself, at the age of 10, was had special needs himself, had dyslexia and learning difficulties. And his teacher says he's going to amount to nothing. His mom believed in him, and his self-concept and self-esteem grew because of her belief in him. But with that, when he went, what he believed, he came up with this concept of brain gym. And in that, it says that what you do not get in your muscle, you do not get in your brain. So, in other words, if you do not move, if you do not embrace balance, if you're not aligned with your spatial freedom, your sense of position, your visual perceptual aspects. So coming from a healthcare perspective, I'm also trained as an occupational therapist. So one of the things we do in school is we look at school readiness, and it's a concept which I know when I first heard of it, when I started applying it, I was like, how can we check if a child is school ready? The concept just seemed a bit crazy to me, a bit vague, because how can the child be school ready when the child's never been to school before? It's just like, horse and cart. It just did not, it did not make any sense. So for me, it is how to So basically, we need to actually look at how to develop the skills when they're little. So if we don't get movement is everything. If we do not move, then we do not learning cannot occur. Because while we're moving, the neurological pathways, the neurophysiology is set, the background is set for it. So I think everyone's familiar with the computer, and we know we have software and hardware, and the neurophysiology is the software in the human being, and how to lay down the software is through movement. I mean, if we stopped a child from crawling, for example, we wouldn't. That child is definitely not going to be able to learn, in a nutshell. So the fact that then from crawling they go to standing is the process of learning how to balance. So now, and then when he's doing these movements, he's exploring his spatial environment, and he's learning that turn too quickly and I bang my head, for example. So this is where I end and where the environment begins. So visual perception. So basically, all these concepts of skill, movement, balance, and spatial freedom for me can be looked at literally and figuratively. So, literally is what I've described, how we experience the world. Figuratively, if we do not move, we cannot understand, we cannot get learning into our brain. To put it simply, is um, if you have a soccer player, for example, right? He has to develop the skill of playing soccer. And then you look at him relative to a goalie, right? The goalie skills are different they're similar, but the skill that he's honed in on is more aligned. And the goalie sense of his space within the goalpost is going to be phenomenal compared to the average Joe out there. So the more we focus on certain skills, you're going to you more you harness on certain abilities, that becomes your skill. So sowing the seeds of movement. So similarly, if the child does not develop their visual perceptual skills, their position in space. Where am I? So position in space is, for example, and I think we're going to be referring to architecture and furniture, and one's environment. So I think what I'm going to be alluding to will be a little bit more neurophysiological, but bear with me, it will align. So when you first learn about yourself and movement, before that, the first thing is the sensory motor awarenesses that's developing in the brain, right? So it's firing at a phenomenal rate. The child is developing and learning new skills every split second. So what's happening is that these neural pathways are forming. As they move, neural pathways form in the brain. Those are your freeways, that's your highways on which learning occurs. That's if you can look at learning in terms of the vehicles of the trucks and cars, if you can look at it, I like to use metaphors. So if you can only put them on roads that exist, but roads which have been created as roadworthy. They're only roadworthy insofar as you have the experience for it, and you've done the amount of crawling. For example, they say a child ought to do something like 80,000 to 800,000 crawls in their lifetime, all right, to get them ready for learning, to get them absolutely school or learning ready. Hence, if a child has special needs, they are referred to an occupational therapist who then works with what? With movement. We don't go to the fact that we don't go to the worksheets. Um, we go to movement because what they don't get in their muscle, they do not get in their brain. So if a person hasn't adequately crawled or walked or learned to balance or hop or skip, they are limited in the extent of which learning happens. So Brainjam has the tagline of what Brainjam, what you do not movement is the base. Sorry, the other one is movement is the basis of all learning, and basically so movement is crucial. So position in space is when you move, the child is learning about himself and how he feels and experiences his body space, so his body schema and his body image. So he's learning about what's me, what's my parts of my body, what's in front, what's behind, what's top, bottom, left, and right of me. what is my laterality,
Mhm.
what's my right hand, left hand. I'm putting it very basically so that we all, we all align. So once he learns this, he also needs to learn where he is relative to his environment. So if right now I'm behind my desk, but my desk, the object is in front of me, but the desk is in front of me. So spatial is like, I am behind the desk or am I under the desk, in front of, left or right. So all this is crucial. So these are all in time kinesthetic movement based learning that is happening on a phenomenal rate just by being.
Right.
And if one understands that this is the basis that learning happens, that is key, how you use your environment.
Thank you. Thank you.
So just want to end off,
Yeah, yeah, please.
yeah, what we get in your muscles, you don't get in your brain.
Mhm.
So the movement is very key.
Right, right. So many words on neurophysiology and neural pathways did fire up my own neurons. So we did get a quote of the day from the get-go. What you do not get in your muscles, you do not get in your brain. So now let's navigate to the other question for Akrik Manisha. You have to talk on how translating movement-based discovery helps into physical school architecture and how default box-like classrooms stifle physical navigation and why architecture must allow for physical exploration, fluidity, and spatial agency from day one. All yours.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very fascinating you presented, and I think the more I think of it is from a child's perspective, and taking back to your first question also is how do we enable children to be innovators? How do we enable them to be thinkers? So I think connecting both these strands, one of the things which I feel is from a very early on age, we do not give children choices because we have this fear for children will fail, that they might not be able to make the right decision. But what we do not enable them is through their mistakes, they learn and then they go ahead and maybe make the next mistake and then they make the next one. And I think those choices which they make allow them to explore different ways of doing things rather than a structured kind of an approach where, yes, they do have to move, yes, they do have to learn, but does that get defined in a particular space or in a particular manner? So I think that's like really the crux. Coming back to the question of classrooms, what if there are no classrooms? And instead of the classroom, it becomes maybe subject rooms, or something which is more like not even a room. There are areas for exploration, which could range from whether it is, at an early age, it could be through performance or through the spoken word or through movement based discovery. So I think a lot of those tools which we imagine spatially can be redefined from the way I look at it. And I think the idea is to really make them realize the impact or the effect that they and how they can navigate their own journey. So I think in the future that would really enable them to make those decisions or become thinkers, critical thinkers. So that's where I would kind of look at the whole process of whether it's classrooms or movement based discovery. Yeah.
And any example from your schooling in your days while you were pursuing architecture, how this concept was brought into reality?
Yeah, I do have a small presentation. I can run through around 4 or 5 slides. Yeah, just like. So this is actually through a project. Y'all can see my screen, right? Can you see my
Yes, yes.
screen? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So this was through a school which we designed. So where we were talking about, how a particular kind of environment. This is for a pre-primary. So I'm looking at the learning years over here. So though these were learning, they were classrooms, but they were not really classrooms because what we looked at is there were 4 pre-primary spaces and how they were translated in a different manner. So for example, this was a room which was for language and drama. So this enabled different kinds of learning processes. One could discover books, one could stand on a small stage where children could perform, the tables could get reconfigured. So, this is, for example, a performance which the children were doing within the classroom. So, it's more about how physical space can be designed to allow a certain amount of flexibility. And the children, like you can see, have painted their own chairs. So, there is that kind of varied ways in which one can do, even design. The other one is this whole space where again the children can pick up a book, they can go and sit on any part of this structure, and or take a toy with them, or maybe there's a slide which you can slide down from behind this. So there are just various ways of movement based discovery over here which would work. And over here actually what you don't see is also there's a door which takes you to an outdoor space which can also allow for different kinds of learning. Even the corridors, the way you navigate through them, the way the children move through them, there are different kinds of interactions possible in these spaces. So yeah, I think this is one for this section where you are questioning the nature of a classroom rather than making it very instruction based. You're looking at a whole environment of play and using those spaces to learn effectively.
Amazing, amazing example and amazing illustrations. Thank you for showing that project. It really matters a lot to everyone watching that. And this makes me move to the next question to Yogi. Like, how do you transition a legacy institution away from the typical compliance cell to match active movement-led pedagogies? And from your experience, how do you turn these design philosophies into real-world school environments without needing a complete teardown? And how modular, agile furniture, flexible collaborative desks can instantly turn any rigid space into a dynamic skill century where children can control their physical layout. I guess it's a very big question, all yours.
Nah, so the couple of things like you said, legacy and compliance based to a real world system. If I take it from there, do a school has intent for that? You know, do as adults they're really willing to change that? Because it is like Hashmila was talking about hardware and softwares. Is there software ready for that? Are their pedagogy aligned to this? Are they visionary? From vision and mission, are they aligned? Is their culture aligned to that? Because if that is not that, you can do whatever practices and things, it may not impact. Okay, so we can create a beautiful spaces, but if kids are not given a choice, if they are given they are being controlled. Okay, so even you design a beautiful spaces without walls, like Manisha was mentioning, you do zones and make it work like that. But if your teacher is standing there and making control of everything, would not work. So first is willingness to change at the leadership level. If that is there, if there is an intent, then and there this whole thing can work out. Okay, in terms of physical spaces, I feel if you have an intent and vision, okay, all the doubts. So Manisha could agree to that, because they would come with the briefs. When a client comes with a brief, they know how much they can expand and consolidate too. Okay, and at certain times when you go beyond the brief, or you wanted to experiment or innovate, they would make you stop, because they fear how it's going to execute every day. It's also like a process-driven, procedural-driven system. Okay, so I don't know you know it or not, but there are four kind of systems. We call clear systems, complicated systems, complex systems, and chaotic systems. So, in all those systemic thinking, how do you really operate it every day? Okay, and learning is a very complex system. Okay, it only gives you answers after insights. When you experienced it, that's where your knowledge starts building differently, or skills start building differently. So in that process, but we are being trained to give it in more instructional instructional way. Because of industrial age, you want certain ways of training to do things in certain way only. That's where you start reducing the individuality. You start stopping them. They are muses. Think of kids in grade 11th and 12th. They start revolting, or they start protesting. But kids at till the 11th or till the 10th, they still are muse, because they feel the adults are doing right thing with them. So willingness is very very important part of the whole process. Second being, if I talk about strategies in classrooms, okay, and if you are willing, then you can do one wall free. If you don't want to tear down your spaces, okay, make it this is thinking wall. making it as an ideation wall, making it as a your own feeling wall. Okay, so how do you feel? You can really look at it. There are walls on the other side of it. If you really want them to be using for collaboration, so let's say sticky notes. How many times we do workshops in our classrooms? How many times we map our ideas? How do you map our one idea to another kid's idea? So where are those spaces? Okay, so that is one way you can do it. Products which you're using or furnitures which you're using should be agile in approaches, because if they can move, they can let kids move. Okay, they can get away. Can in 45 minutes session, can I get a break of movement? Can I stand and breathe in the way I should be? Because today biological somatics says that if you are sitting for more than 2 hours, you are taking more poison than smoking a cigarette. Okay, so are this is allowed to them? Can we get it done that way? If you are talking about, is there a choice to sit on a different tiers? If I want to sit on the floor, can I given that choice? If I want to stand and study, can I given that choices? If I want to read a book, is there a corner available in the classroom to refer that resource? Okay, if I want to experiment something, can I experiment this in classroom, or should I wait for a laboratory period to come down? Okay, so is there this multifunctionality in this space? Okay, is there a multi-tierness in the spaces? So if I look at those dynamics, when your learning happens, it is not only one way of instruction. So it brings me down to the idea of gurukuls when they were there, and today we have a choice to become gurukuls again. Okay, because the goal of education there was self-elevation. Okay, the goal of today's education is occupation. Okay, can we shift it to self-elevation again? Because if you look at your content is no more with the teachers. So teacher has to be facilitators, there has to be mentors, they are there has to be inspiration agents to you. Okay, there have to be teachers who figuring out gifts inside you. Okay, so if you are wanted to gurukul again, can we look at a kid and say that he's going to be, let's say, blacksmith or a goldsmith or whatever skills they have? Okay, can we take their gift, get them a pathway? Okay, and that's what the whole caste system has been brought down. There were basically community systems earlier. So we have an opportunity to be gurukuls again, because technology is giving us that power. But are we ready for that kind of thinking? So from just it is first intent, and the moment you bring an intent to maybe for all of three of us, maybe Ashmila or Manisha or me, will try and translate them into a physical space which can work for them, for adaptiveness, for innovation, for leadership. But it starts with that leadership mindset.
So, Yogi, good quote that if furniture can move, your child can move. And your example of Gurukul did remind me of like Dronacharya asking all the students to target on one bird, and Arjun just targeted the eye of a bird, and he told that yes, he's
Yeah.
going to be the archer.
Yeah, so
So
this is how
yeah,
you identify. That's how you used to figure out the gifts of people. Okay, so and then start you to give community, and then their upgrades were like that. So today we are teaching competition. We are expecting collaboration. You know, think of it in workforces. You expect anyone who's coming to you work with you. You want collaborate with them in the first day. It would not happen because they've been not trained to do this. So can we not make our classrooms as dynamic as the world outside within? you know if we can do this, that's where the change can bring out, because that is the laboratory where I can experiment what I'm going to do in the world. So should I not design my school or classrooms like that? So that's the viewpoint.
perfect. Many thanks for concluding that theme in a very bright way. Now let's move on to spatial autonomy, the physiology of soft skills. The big question here is going to be, how does spatial autonomy build critical soft skills like negotiation, boundary setting, and teamwork? And the first discussion of this panel comes to Hashmila and Yogi, where you have to answer in just 4 minutes, like how choosing where to work, how to sit or stand, and how to configure a workspace teaches children basic self-regulation, sensory integration, and group negotiation. Hashmila, first to you. I guess you went on mute. If you could please unmute.
Apologies.
Yeah.
So when we learn in movement, 3D, 2D. So you learn with movement, you work with games, and then you work on, you then get onto desktop type of activities. So that's how learning actually occurs. Um, so when we so how choosing where to work, your workstations, it's related, it's got functional, there should be functional associations like the one Yogi was alluding to. So depending what they want to do, where they want to do, they must have a dress up area, a puzzle mat, a sandpit, for example, so they can explore the sensory feel of things. How to sit or stand developmentally, it should be appropriate for them. With just quickly alluding to the tech space, when you standing for hours, we Yogi alluded to how health-wise it's now being documented how unhealthy it is, and it's the new it's not what you want to experience. So you have ergonomically correct desks that you can use, the adjustability, adaptability, height adjustment, so you can have the same equipment but a lot of adaptations in it, so you can have all ages meeting that need. So how this is important in terms of workspace is, yeah, I said economically, and then basically it teaches them self-regulation, sensory integration, and group negotiation. How does it do that? So your self-regulation occurs, it's about input and output. What I take in, how I process it, and how I digest it. That's self-regulation. How do you self-manage yourself? How do you do self-management? So with the children, you're looking at this in terms of personal management. I do a lot of work with ECD space, so I'm going to allude to that, and we can apply it for the different ages accordingly. But you look at self-regulation in terms of personal management skills, the eating, the toileting, nutrition, dressing, basic hygiene. Work day for the child is play. So the manner in which they work, applying manners, turn taking, patience, and it requires them to be diplomatic. So self-regulation in terms of that, and in terms of general regulation, their playtime and sleep time. Then you've given me 4 minutes to do a very difficult, complex thing, because there's so much to be said about all this. Coming to sensory integration, sensing is very important. A child learns through three, if we look at it quickly, dimensionally, they learn through attentional intelligence, then emotional intelligence, and informational intelligence. They kind of blend into the three, but for learning, you categorize the three. But the sensing is the I am safe. You need to feel safe in the environment, and you can do it in various ways. So your ecosystem is key here. It leads itself to your X's, what I call your X's and O's. So they need to have X for experiences and O for opportunities. So your environment and your situation, your ecosystem must lend itself to experiences and opportunities for them to have their sensory explorations. Vestibular being one of the key aspects. That's the movement aspect, right? Um, and then the group negotiation is here is where they can explore the ability to be a leader, a follower, express patience, their resilience, um, their sense of managing emotions, and social norms of interpersonal behavior, intrapersonal behavior, just general engagement with authority, with peers, with your siblings, with friends. So the environment, you can also, so one of the things, and it ties in with what Yogi says, to me, it must be, when you're talking about spaces, they must be welcoming for the family, because learning doesn't happen alone, it happens in an ecosystem, um, kind of thinking. So yeah, so the nature of the interaction is key. Movement, 3D or games, and then it's because to get it into their muscles, and then the 2D desktop is a no-brainer part of it. Yeah, thank you.
Amazing,
Sorry,
amazing.
so those build up soft skills, which are negotiations, boundary setting, and teamwork. Thank you.
Amazing diversity of choices that you gave. And I'll remember this X and O, experiences and opportunities. Thank you so much for terming that. And Yogi, before you answer, they have added a question to you: how to shift the teacher's physical presence from a front of the room lecturer to a spatial facilitator and mentor? I guess it's about the sage of the stage. So all yours.
So if I'll connect what Hashmila also mentioned, but think of it again. Stage on the stage is an idea very, very, very relevant when we want to train our kids. Okay, because if you want them to work on machines like machines, that's a phenomenal idea. Okay, you get them proficient skills. Okay, uh, but do you look at 21st century skills and you find proficiency as a skill? Okay, we are not look proficiency as a skill because we are doing AI or machines or machine learning for that. We are changing from proficiency to creativity as a skill. So when you want a creative teams or creative brain, okay, the way would be different. Okay, so it says when you want a creative teams, you need to give them a problem and probably let them with the problem, and then figure it out. Okay, so when you do this way, you don't need a teacher. Okay, you probably need a guide to give them a direction. Okay, or a mentor that are how they are making their choices. Okay, because he by his experiences could add value to that. So there is no more stage on the stage that way. So it is if you look at project-based learning for that matter, or theme-based learning, or a problem-based learning. On you talk about any pedagogies who's relevant to lifelong long learning models, it would different. So I don't know how many of you had gone through, and I'm just cutting between my thoughts itself. Angela Mayers for World Economic Forum, she had given an interesting model for lifelong learning. It says we need three key things. One is foundation literacies, okay? So be it ICT, financial literacy, language literacies, numerical literacies, okay? They're key literacies. These are foundational literacies which we use everyday task. The second comes out competencies, the self competencies. Okay, it is creativity, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, all of that. And third pillar she talks about is character qualities, cultural awareness, compassion, leadership, all that. Okay, so when you look at these three models, if you know what is foundational literacies need to be learned to, the competencies which I need to, and if I apply it from any junior age to lifelong learning pathways, it will work. So this is how you have been given those chances. So what you are asking, Sage, on the stage is that proficiency model needed in all these lifelong learning models? Okay, so we need to really segregate between what a model does to us. So when you do a physical spatial allowances, what is doing to you? So why do we call space as third teacher? Okay, like Hashmila said, it has to be welcoming. So how it is translating to different communities? Is their parents allowed in the community, or they need to wait in the cars outside the school to pick their kids? Okay, are they only allowed for PTM? Are they only allowed for fees? Okay, so how you are building your community? Where is the space for them? Okay, so you have to translate between how all stakeholders are having voices in this. Okay, so and it all becomes changeable that way. So like when Ashmila was talking about self-regulation or sensory integrations and all of this, I believe when we look at all these connections deep down, what is relevant for our kids in that vision, it starts building at fine-tuned level, where the expertise like Manisha or Hashmila can come down and probably link those things for any school. But point is, are we making them belonged in that area? Are we clear ourselves being an as educator? So today, when you look at schools, are mostly being operated by either industrialists or businessmen or politicians. How many educators who's leading schools as education is education a passion? Because you are going to build, your next generation of your nation someday. So how are we thinking on that direction is little relevant in that term, and then the space can definitely take the pathways. So yeah.
So, Yogi, going by your point, I had to say, for example, if our schools had makerspace, so for example, if it was architect Manisha in school, so if she had a makerspace in school, so she would have identified that she wanted to become an architect from the school days itself. She had a passion for it.
Maybe she has something else also. How do we know?
Yeah.
So point is, she may be a musician for that matter, or an engineer, or an architecture itself has a lot of different fine tunings between that. Okay, so it being neuro architect or bio oriented, and there are a lot of So my point is, when you allow that kind of exploration, it at least gives some direction of the gift. I know my kid, she wanted to learn through design. Okay, so if she's may not interested in numbers right away. Okay, but if you talk in her language and then connect the dots, she'll accept it faster, because that's the passion. So most of us has gone in our journeys and changed our pathways of careers, and if you have a passion of that, you learn it. You'll go dig deeper, and that's what lifelong learning models are all about. We're learning each every day, and may not be without with mentors or guides today, but it's through our passion and that ignition inside us that which is giving us that pathway. So can we ignite that passion as identifying their gifts? So if you have a maker's space, it's an exploration. This is a space which is allowing you. But if you don't let a kid touch and maker space, it's an instructional. Think about our physics and chemistry experiments. They're predefined experiments with the predetermined results. If your potassium permanganate is not diluting at 100 ml, you are doing something wrong. Okay, so idea was not to observe what is that wrong you are doing, but idea was to look at results are not matching as per the experiment given in the classrooms. So that's the world we were in or we are still in. Are we allowing them to observe those mistakes and probably learn from that? So how many, because school, that's what I said, this is laboratory. School itself is a lab. How many times we are allowing them to do those mistakes and pick it from there? And that's all home maker spaces. So Manisha could have been pick different mistakes and be someone else also. Sorry, Manisha. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. So, yeah, it all circles back to what Manisha told in that starting only. Let them do some mistakes, let them learn. So, yes, coming back to a question for Manisha. Why in between spaces like corridors, staircase lounges, open transitional zones are where genuine social skills, negotiation, and student teacher interactions are practiced and won? All yours.
Yeah, so I'd like to also share some slides on this. I think it's such a relevant discussion in terms of how do you enable children to think. And I think coming back to that idea where if you give them possibilities and allow them choice, give them a lot of choices, they will make those choices. And I think how one introduces them to, like you said, it has to be facilitated, not as a sort of a rote learned kind of an environment. So I mean, this the next thing which you mentioned over here is about these in between. We talk often about programmed areas. We talk about classrooms. We talk about art room. We talk about a sports room or a laboratory. So here, one of the things which we feel is something that is contiguous across our entire practices. Learning is actually shaped by many different environments, and a lot of them are where it extends beyond the classroom. So a connected social landscape. There are formal and informal environments which are integrated to allow for that interaction, collaboration and independent exploration. So you have, for example, there could be an amphitheater, there could be steps which could become those spaces, or you have interactive spaces of different types. You have reading nooks within the corridors. You have student hubs which are exposed. You have possibilities of seating or study pods. So through certain examples, I'll just share what we've done, where you look at the movement spine really and allow certain collaboration areas through the building. And these, for example, are those spaces. And sometimes the classrooms are made transparent so that they also have a relationship. And these become flexible. So there could be loose seating, there could be some storage areas, and across the section, you allow certain interactions to happen even across the corridors. Now, this was an existing building, so we didn't really design the envelope, but
Are you presenting sorry to interrupt. Are you presenting a slide or you want the backend team to show something?
there is nothing showing up. I'm so sorry. There wasn't anything showing up.
Yeah. No, no, it was
Oh God. Okay, I'm so sorry. Let me just. Um, can you see this?
not yet.
Oh God. Okay. Okay.
Uh,
It did it the last time, right?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, it did. So, just like in between spaces, these are in between moments, right?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that.
No, no, it's perfectly fine. So, yeah, you can continue the conversation until that PowerPoint appears, slide appears.
Is anything showing up now?
Not yet. If you would like to set, yeah.
Okay, I don't know how to make this share.
You'll find a share screen button at the bottom navigation bar.
Yeah, no, I did that.
Mhm. Okay. Um, you can-
Yeah, okay, wait. Now I think it should share. Is it sharing now?
hold for a moment.
no, no, not yet.
No.
Uh, okay, I don't know. It shared the last.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, last time it got shared, but you can name those projects and you can share some visual experiences. People would relate.
Okay, sure. So, yeah, no, I was talking about this. Basically, the in-between spaces really become those spaces where one can interact and use certain kinds of environments to facilitate interaction. Now, sometimes a corridor, and also if it is something that is overlooking some space, it can also become a place for reflection, where it is an outdoor and an indoor boundary. I really would have liked to share these slides. Maybe you can take another question and I will try to figure out from someone
Mm,
in office.
sure, sure,
Uh,
sure. And yeah, until you come back, we have a great question coming up. This is the kind of dialogue for all three of you. Actionable spatial shifts. So the dialogue goes on to, if a school leader or educator wants to foster independent, movement-led thinking, what is one immediate, low-cost usability shift they can make to their physical layout or daily schedule right next week? So Hashmila, if you could please take it up.
Um, sorry, we. So I just got distracted. Sorry, we're looking at question
Yeah,
four,
so
is it?
can you ask the question again?
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah, I'll do that. If a school leader or educator wants to foster
Thank you.
independent, movement-led thinking, what is one immediate, low-cost usability shift they can make to their physical layout or daily schedule right in the next week?
Okay, so to me, a no-brainer would be to go for a walk in the garden, you know. So okay, you want to foster independence and movement-led thinking. Okay, so usually what I would suggest is like, as I said, go for a walk in the garden, grounding themselves. When you can't, thinking requires you to be centered and focused. And so if your senses are quietened, and you feel safe, you can think. And if your emotions are all over the show and you're not feeling grounded, it's hard to think. So the place where, I think we are like natural antennas. We all are energy fields at the end of the day, and we have charges. So you want to neutralize, and this is just summarizing what's all out there and my experiences over time. You walk outside, you ground yourself, you your polarity is aligned, you're now centered. So in brain gym, and we look at brain integration, and it's in a form of a lazy eight. I'm not showing any slides, but I'm hoping we can express this. And if in a figure of eight is a sign of, that's an integration sign. That also is, yeah, it represents integration, and at the center of that is where we need to be, totally focused. So taking a walk outside in the garden will help you to get to that X marks the spot, is what I call it, to get to that sweet thinking spot. So you are thinking creatively, you can be the leader, and I believe everyone's born to be a leader. The Industrial Revolution style of teaching has taken us away from ourselves. We need to come back to self. So the yoga mat needs to come out as well. So the yoga mat, pranayam, getting back to the breath. When I see children, the first thing that's out is their breath. the first thing I work with is their breath. If they and your breath is your golden thread. And if we can take a children and the awareness of learning to that space where we can have the teacher not that word needs to be narrative has to be changed. One of them, and I've done a co-pilot study at a school here. We created a Gujarati school. We had a Gujarati school where we used it as a co-pilot and we adopted some of these procedures where we said you're not a teacher, you're a facilitator. And we had certain premises where if you are talking more than the child, then we're using the old model. That's out. We scrapped that. We pushed the furniture aside. We put the mat in front. The children were to be seated. Teacher needed to be down there with the children. ECD primary doable even in high school. I don't see why not. It is grounding, and right now where it's either ego-based learning, ego-based, or your identity. You identify with your identity and your roles, or you're playing in your creative genius space. I don't know if anybody is aware of the NASA study. I'm going to use this because I need to. This is I love this. I don't know whether you all know about the NASA study. Are you all aware of the NASA study of creative geniuses?
No.
Yes, so in that space, and I can see Yogi alluded to what you were making reference to. I was aware that you probably read this as well. Is basically you either playing in one or the other. Then how to illuminate the creative genius within you. It goes back to the fact that the teachers need to not teach or be an authoritarian figure. They need to help you align to your center. There, the yoga mats come out. You need to align with your breath because, as I said, my years of studying, the first thing I work with is the breath. If the breath is out, they're anxious, the breath is out. You've got to align them and give them what's the word? Empowerment. So how can you get them to find the internal power? Because it's not with some that creative genius is not in some of us, it's in every single one of us. The models that we've had have moved us away from that. You alluded to that term of I love that term, Gurukul, and intentional based learning. Yes, we can get them to that. I do believe there's a way in which we do that. I've got a program myself that I call the Noticing Lotus. If we can teach the child to be the noticing lotus, they are empowered. They will be able to bring out their best possible potential. Infinite potential will come out. And like we said, Manisha, the little Manisha, if we go to our 8-year-old, that 8-year-old knows the answers. The little Manisha, that 8-year-old Manisha would have a variety of skills that will come and pop to the fore. And the new generation, I do believe, will have multiple skills. Not that we don't have, and I'm sure Manisha does have, and we're using Manisha's example as the designed interest or skill factor that we're aligning with. But we're saying that we can have multiple skills in your varied aspects of intelligences. We've got multiple intelligences that we have. And we have multiple dimensions in which learning occurs, and breath is but one. If you get a person's breath back, you're giving them their power back. Breath is synonymous with your power. Self regulation is synonymous with self management. Focus is synonymous with attentional intelligence. Centering is aligned with your emotions and your organizational skills. If that is not in place, and if your sense of self, in terms of, I said, spatial, if you don't know what's happening, you're going to have reversals. You're not going to be able to see things in perspective. So there's 7 dimensions. That we are aware of. There's many, but it is possible. We have to actually hero the person and the innate skills within us. So we have what I'm focusing, and to just round off, is we need to go to internal focus of locus of control first, less on external locus of control. So bring out the garden into play, mat, yoga mat, sit on the floor, grounding, blackboard charts and painting, black black what they call it, black chalkboard painted walls and whiteboards on the side where the child is freely able to go and explore. So those are some of the ideas I have in mind.
Great.
And the most low cost is obvious that it's you have already whatever you need is within you. Let's explore.
Lovely, lovely answer. So while you were saying,
Thank
yeah, we are directing all the examples to Manisha. So I
Yeah.
felt like Amitabh Bachchan of KBC making Manisha sit in the hot seat and we actually asking questions to her. So, and yes, while you were referring to Gurukul system and what Manisha told about the step seating, this reminded me of the Bauli, the step wells we already had. They were also meant for social interaction. So now many of the designers are getting those back into learning spaces. So coming back to Manisha, if your slides are sorted, then yes, we can play it or we can move to the next question.
Yeah. No, I'm going to just try to see if I can project, or I've sent the presentation to Yashmi.
Okay,
So if it can, let's see it. Otherwise, I'll request her to share it.
sure.
Is it sharing it now?
Yes.
Yes, is it sharing? Okay, great.
Yes, yes.
So I'm just going to run through a few of the examples that I was talking about without the slides. What you have over here are like these corridors, for example. We mentioned a lot of the spaces which are not classrooms, but they are, in fact, sometimes more important than the classroom itself. So this is one corridor which you see students starting to look at this interface between the outside and the inside.
And your slide
This
went
is in a
away.
higher,
Then your
sorry.
slide went away. Could you please reshare that? Your slide went away.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Can you see that? Can you see this slide?
Yes, yes, we can. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So this is now, I'm just taking it from another kind of a space to an architectural college where the corridor which you see actually in between was imagined as something like this. You know, it's this extremely vibrant space where you have combinations of smaller amphitheater, discussion spaces, smaller lecture halls, and besides that, access to the different areas, you know, classrooms or studios as we'd call them. So this was one, and this is that central space. Of course, this was without the children in it, but we were imagining it to be used extensively, both vertically across the building. So one of the things which we feel is in a building you have different levels, and how do those movement get overlapped with each other and allow a certain kind of a transparency and collaborative environment. Um, so again, we spoke about amphitheaters. So what you see over here is the steps can also become large amphitheaters where there are activities like discussions or meetings, general body meetings which are held in the space. Or in this case, the amphitheaters also become the larger areas. So these are all transitional spaces. They are all in between the different programs. Even the staircases can become these areas. So the idea is, how do the spaces, whether they are courtyards, whether they are collaborative areas within the building but outside of the classroom, get different activities which can enable possibilities of interaction, as well as even spaces where children can sit in the middle of the day at some point and work silently, or collaborate with two people doing a project, or waiting for a lift to come, waiting for a friend to finish from their class. So these are all ways in which spaces can enable different kind of shared environments and shared learning. So I mean, I think the idea, yeah, I think, yeah, I've stopped sharing it now. Yeah. So the idea is just how do you allow for those interactions to, you're in a very collaborative environment already because there's so many children coming together. And so how do you enable those interactions and of different types? So it could be casual over a meal, or it could be through a thing that a child wants to share. if I was a student, which I still believe I am in some ways, and everyone has proclaimed that I'm still learning, but I think I would want to see and understand different perspectives, and learn from the other children and learn from everyone else around me, not just the teachers. So I think these kind of spaces really enable one to interact more subconsciously with each other rather than learning in a classroom. So I think that's the whole idea, that these spaces are sometimes more important than the classroom. Of course, we should have classrooms which are highly flexible and interactive and all of that, but I think it's the casual encounters sometimes, I feel, have more meaning, like the sketch made in outside the cafeteria in sept, on the on the seat or in the outdoors, was probably more meaningful than something which was discussed in the studio. So I think enabling that possibility is important. Yeah.
Great, great. And while you were saying about the peer, of course, I couldn't remember if I had any peer-to-peer learning in my school days, other than the projects that we took. But in college, always before the exams, we used to get together. Somebody knows this concept, somebody knows this lesson, so we used to study together last days before the exams, like we do in India. So that brings us to a round robin question as the closing theme of this session. We have this question addressed to every one of you. So, starting from Yogi, one piece of advice for school owners who want to align their physical campuses with the actual developmental and biological needs of 21st century learners.
Okay. So, if you are looking for advice on biological development or neurological development, or the human in a biological sense, uh, I think first is awareness. Do we really value the awareness? Because my question comes to humans in the first sense. If they are not aware, you cannot make the change. Okay. So, if I know that we have a amygdala as a biological organ, which is responsible for emotional, responses and learning. Okay. Or neurons mapping, which is association of memories. Okay. Or prefrontal cortex for experiences. So when we know this biological thinking, okay, or somatic cognitive action networks, so our muscles also learns, and that fits to our brain. Okay. So if we talk about all this biological growth of humans, are they been evaluated, valued enough, and are they connected to a pedagogical system? So think of teachers of today. They, if you ask them, what are they doing in the school, they would say, my this class I'm at this chapter. Okay, so they work on that method of modules of teaching. So this is where the problem's coming around, because their whole thinking is procedural, and humans don't learn into procedures only, because our wires are it's like pizza and noodles. Okay, so we are being taught in pizza modes, but our brains works in noodle modes. They're intertwined. Okay, so you think about one and you go to another way. Okay, and that's what makes us as a unique humans, or the unique gifts which we have, like the creative genesis in everyone is very different. So the point is, do we address that? So if that's the biological being of humans, and that has been segregated as knowledge of learning, has been connected to pedagogical systems or not. If they're connected to pedagogical system, then you can connect the dots, that if I'm doing, let's say, so are we in periods? Okay, so is it one period after another period after another period? So are we switching subjects between Hindi to science to maths? Okay, that's one way to look at it. Or is it a 6 weeks system? Okay, in 6 weeks, humans can learn more if there is a theme or there is a project or something, and you map your subjects to that, rather than fragmenting them. So that is more of a connection between biology to a teaching path. Okay, because if I like all of us been at weddings for 6 5 6 days. Okay, and when you are there in experience, you are not in fragments, you are in that experience. Is your human body getting that experience of pedagogy? Okay, like the humans should do it. So because in our real life, problem doesn't come in packets. you know it is one after the other. Okay, so it has been entertained that way. Second, like Manisha was mentioning about corridors, okay, how do we really see the physical spaces connecting to the goal and pathways? So I don't know, you know it or not, but corridors surprisingly came from jails. Okay, because if you look at jail designs, they are corridor designs. Okay, so you have cells both the sides and corridor in the center. Okay, they're also been connected with bells. Okay, our schools are connected with bells. So you have a bell ring, your door opens. Your bell rings, your door closes. Okay, our classrooms have been designed like that. So it is all command and control system, which is part of industrial revolution some way. Because jails were need to be command and controlled, and schools need to be command and controlled in those times. So if you look at those spatial connections, how they are connecting to your pedagogy, then the place thinking would come. Okay, and is your stakeholder aligned or trained or sequenced for that kind of spatial thinking? So it's like people, process, places. All three has to connect together to bring this, so your culture, your flow, your experience has to align to get that magic of learning happen. So my advice is, do you understand, connect it to pedagogy, and then connect to physical spaces, have awareness of it, and you can really do it well.
Just like a Gen Z would say, that was deep, although I'm a millennial. So,
Sure.
coming to Hashmila, same question to you.
Okay, so the ecosystem and its dynamic components needs to value the organic factors, the authentic versus the artificial environment, versus functional environment, and the benefits of it. So what am I referring to? So sometimes your experiences and your opportunities, like what Yogi referred to, happens in real time in situations. It's your opportunities to learn. So for me, when I was in school, for example, excursions, I would remember, you'd kind of remember everything sensory wise. You would remember it on a different level than something that you listen to in class, right? So you an intern every level. So for me, the experiences and opportunities are key. Some of the things I want to do in my closing thoughts is this the closing thoughts, right? Or is this the
Yeah,
just
yeah,
it's
these are
just
the
the
closing
round
thoughts.
robin? Yeah, the closing. Okay, so
Closing
so,
thoughts.
so what I'd say in some ways that okay, that was the. In just quickly referring to what Manisha was saying about those places of just relaxing, and I think what she said to share ideas. It also, as she was saying it, it just showed me we have as humanity how we've made this shift that we always constantly need to be thinking or working about a concept. If we're not in class discussing a concept with teacher, we're discussing a concept with the child in class. When is downtime? What's happening? Know how to do. We've been socialized not to have the mentality of if we are not actively busy, we're not busy, and therefore we are not actively being productive, which is again an industrial revolution type of way. My visit to India showed me how people relax. They would just sit in the day and relax. So what I'm to is also those spaces that you referred to, Manisha, is for places to really happens when your muscle releases. In the release moments, your relaxed moment is when you're absorbing and internalizing the information, and actually that's when the deep learning is actually happening. So that release, those places to relax, like in Microsoft, they created hammocks for them to relax. They finally, the penny dropped that when they most relaxed and not thinking, that they're doing the deepest creative sourcing and critical thinking that is will be phenomenal. So, in rounding up, I say what we need to do in schools for me is move the furniture back. This is what we did in that Gujarati school. We changed around. We moved the furniture back. We increased the use of the floor space and got them to do more sessions outdoors than indoors. Um, we got so I believe that we need to do most organic learning of most organic learning environments. So to downplay the concrete jungle and go to the real jungle out there, and have lessons under trees, because the reset, restore, regenerative thought processing can happen, and there's grounding that happens in that level. So they're to structurally, put up a tent, get them to put up a tent and create an area inside and outside. So those little on the staircase is a lovely area to do that. Then no more teacher, the facilitator or mentorship role, where the teacher sees herself as guiding the student, and aligns with the ethos that I mentioned earlier. Parents to feel free and welcome to utilize the associative spaces. So the areas you refer to, like the associative spaces, to use it in a welcoming yet unobtrusive manner. And then to actually remember that the child is the center of the education experience. If you are experiencing the learning for the first time, collaborative, and to work in a collaborative manner. So what I mean is just to schools to realign the fact that the child is the center of being lost along the way. I'm seeing children, the children I'm seeing in schools are not being seen, and absorb that for a while. The children are not being seen. An adult, we're actually asking the children to come to an adult world, and not that the adults need to acknowledge that the child, they are solution based critical thinkers at birth. They're born with it at 98%. We need to learn from them. I've got which I've not have, I could refer to my slide, but if you can visualize this, Aladdin's lamp and a genie popping out. The child is the genie. Um, the genie represents the child. When the child is out there, out of the lamp, the genius, he's with 98% creative genius. In other words, innovative ways of thinking, out of the box, varied ways of thinking. He already has it. He's come with it. It's us that this ability to think critically. We're going into our century. We need to we need to be that solution, idea based, innovative thinker. And in order to do that, I've lost my train of thought now, but in order to do that, that genie now, what we do is, if we picture that lamp as the school, right? We actually sucking him into that, and we telling him that's the adult world that we've now been socialized in. And there's hope, because if we realize, we can still in a couple of seconds shatter that lamp and actually realize that the world is our school, and I call it Earth, School of Life. That's what we have to do. And Mata is the sense of life, divine conscious awareness, living, loving, learning. So ADL, activities of your so is your knowledge based center. Based center, which houses facilitators who aligns your creative genius thinkers, who are then, the teachers must facilitate the way of thinking by experiences and opportunities, the X's and O's. They must give them experiences and opportunities. Let's go to the coast, let's go to the beach today and we're going to explore. Okay, we're in class, so we pretend and imagine under the tent, but we take them to various and get them to explore in their mind discussions, in their critical thinking of how to explore and solve problems. That's what they want to do. There's no problem. We haven't got, we take sand and water and we make mud. We make techniques. So the thing is that the genius, we get the 2% of adults, we need to increase them towards closer to the 98%. And we get the new children to retain their 98% creativity by adopting,
Mm.
and heroing the soft skills of a human being. And not so be looking at the internal control and reducing the value on the external locus of control, um, and and thereby aligning with the correct developmental and biological and physiological nature of a human being who is the Devo that we need to be out there.
Right.
These children of today are born very tech savvy, so they already have a lot of skills available to them. Um, yeah, and all I've learned is those children that are getting lost. I've realized that if you give respect, you get respect, and out there. So thank you. X's and O's. Yeah, thanks. That's it.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those diversity of thoughts. I have the same question for Manisha before we sum up.
Yeah, just kind of, I think, I mean, I really value the perspective that create awareness, which Yogi mentioned, or keeping the child, which Hashmila mentioned. I think there is uh, the perspective that I would have will be a little more from the design perspective, and how do we enable spaces and how do we enable learning environments. I think the process each child undergoes to learn is very different from each other. So I think creating a process or a particular kind of space or a kind of a learning pedagogical intent is very needs to be challenged, the way I would look at it. And also whether it is the way I would kind of summarize, and of course these are things which everyone knows about, but you have whether it's projects, instruction based learning, whether it's a kind of an exploratory medium that's through, or it is technology enabled today, because there is a lot of related to different kind of learning processes, whether it is movement based, because some things which one needs are related to the exploration of the body within space. So whether it's dance, whether it's yoga, whether it's physical education, any sporting. So I think there is also auditory, whether it's certain kinds of music learning, music based learning. So there are different processes. And how do you or how does a person who's envisioning an institution think about all these processes? And basically the idea is to develop both the mind and the body of a child. And I think that's where I would look at as one piece of sort of possible, in case if that is not being thought of, that would be the first perspective to start off. And just one more small thing, I think you mentioned that the clients today give us a brief and we work with that brief and they don't allow us to think. I don't think that's necessarily true in a lot of ways, because they don't know, they sometimes they don't know, they do not give it as a part of their brief. But today clients are more and more aware, which is actually a great, or they're willing to listen. Even if they're not, they're willing to listen and hear different perspectives on how transformations, like learning, even we learn through a project. It's like you apply that learning in another, and you apply it in another context or another user group. So I think it's endless, and the discussions have been great, and we've been fortunate to work with many great educators, and different perspectives of learning, whether it is a national curriculum or an international curriculum, or at a higher level of education. I think everyone is learning to in some ways engage much more than they were before. So that's a very positive sort of a perspective. Yeah, that's it.
That was the most encouraging conclusion we could ever give to a LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much, Akir Maisha. So it's time for me to conclude this session and express my gratitude to everyone who has joined this LinkedIn Live from all around the world. Thank you to CIVOM for inviting us. Thank you, Yogi. Thank you, Ashmila. Thank you, Manisha, for joining this session and
Thank
enlightening everyone, enlightening school owners, educators, architects, designers who are designing learning spaces and learning environments for the 21st century learners. Okay. So thank you to everyone. Until we meet again. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you all. Thank you all.
thank you so